There are moments in life when the weight of unpaid bills, looming debts, and empty bank accounts feels heavier than the very air we breathe. Some of you listening right now are lying awake at night, your mind racing with worry, asking, how will I make it? How will I survive this storm? I want you to know today, your hope is not in the bank. Your security is not in your paycheck. Your future is not chained to the economy. Your true source is higher, greater, and unfailing. Faith has the power to shift mountains, and if faith can move mountains, surely it can move money, provision, and every resource you need. You see, money is a servant, not your master. When you walk by faith, you don't beg for financial breakthroughs, you command them. You don't plead with lack, you speak to it and declare, move. Make way for abundance. Faith is the force that takes you from fear to freedom, from scarcity to supply. Right now, chains of poverty can be broken. Right now, doors of opportunity can swing open. And right now, your voice of faith can command money to move into your life. There are times when the noise of financial struggle becomes so loud that it drowns out every other thought. Bills stacked on the table speak louder than your prayers. Bank accounts with more zeros in debt than in savings scream in your face. Creditors knocking at your door shout with intimidation, but I tell you today, faith has a louder voice. Faith speaks beyond the natural, beyond what your eyes see, beyond what the world tells you. Faith lifts its voice and declares, my God shall supply all my needs according to his riches in glory. Finances can try to control your peace, but faith reminds you that peace doesn't come from a paycheck. Faith speaks life when finances scream death. Faith sees abundance when lack stares back. And here's the truth. What you choose to listen to determines the path you will walk. If you listen to the voice of lack, you will stay in chains. But if you allow the voice of faith to rise inside you, you will command provision and it will obey. Finances may talk, but faith will always talk louder if you dare to speak. I remember a story of a woman who was left with nothing but 2 children to feed and a handful of groceries in her kitchen. Her husband had walked away, and the little money she earned was swallowed by rent. One evening she sat on her floor crying out of desperation. Her bank account was empty, and her heart was heavy. But then something inside her shifted. She stood up, wiped her tears, and began to walk around her home declaring, I will not be forsaken. I will not be abandoned. Provision will come to me. Day after day, she spoke life into her situation. Neighbors who never noticed her before began to show up with meals. A job offer she never applied for opened at her doorstep. And within months, her situation transformed. What happened? Faith rose louder than her finances. Her words of belief created an atmosphere for miracles. She did not bow to the voice of lack. She chose to let faith roar in the face of emptiness, and abundance followed. You see, when faith speaks, it doesn't whisper, it roars with authority. Faith never takes sides with fear. Finances may say, you can't afford this, you'll never come out of debt, your future is sealed. But faith responds, I am blessed, I am favored, I am more than a conqueror. Finances speak limitation, but faith speaks multiplication. Finances point to the lack in your hand, but faith points to the seed in your heart. Faith sees beyond the numbers and into the promises. That's why you must never let your finances have the last word. Yes, bills may be due, but don't let that be your final thought. Declare that every need is met. Yes, your paycheck may look too small, but don't let that silence your spirit. Declare that increase is coming. Faith is not blind. Faith simply refuses to accept the voice of lack as the final authority. Faith also speaks in action, not just in words. When you dare to give in the middle of lack, when you dare to sow even when your finances tell you to withhold, you are letting faith speak. Finances may tell you, hold tight. You don't have enough. But faith says release it and watch multiplication come. Finances may tell you protect yourself, but faith says trust God with your everything. Every act of generosity is faith raising its voice louder than fear. And the truth is, heaven responds to faith. Heaven does not respond to worry or begging. It responds to bold declarations and courageous actions. That's why every time you speak life, every time you choose to act in faith instead of bowing to financial fear, You are creating an environment for supernatural provision. The louder faith speaks, the smaller financial problems become, because you are aligning your life with the promises of God rather than the pressure of bills. The woman with the little groceries could have stayed on her floor, paralyzed by fear, but she chose to rise and let her voice of faith echo louder than her pain. And the same choice is before you today. You don't have to be silent when lack screams. You don't have to bow when bills rise. You don't have to surrender your peace to the voice of finances. Speak boldly, declare abundance, command increase. Let your words set the tone for your tomorrow. Remember, the most powerful voice in your life is not the one speaking from the mailbox or the bank account. It is the voice of faith that speaks from within you. And when faith speaks, finances must bow, resources must move, and provision must obey. Faith doesn't just speak, it shouts louder, stronger, and with authority that cannot be denied. Money was never designed to sit on a throne in your life. It was never created to dictate your joy, control your peace, or define your worth. Yet for so many, money has become the master, and their entire lives rise and fall with it. When the account is full, they are happy, but when it is empty, they are broken. When the job is secure, they walk in peace, but when the job is lost, their hope collapses. Money is not your master. It is only a servant. It is a tool, a resource meant to work for you, not rule over you. True freedom comes when you realize you are not a slave to paychecks, bills, or bank statements. Your source is higher than paper bills and digital numbers. The moment you put money in its rightful place, you regain authority. You no longer live chained to the fear of losing it because you know it is not your master. You begin to see money as a servant, following your faith, moving at your command, and serving the purpose of your destiny. There was once a man who worked tirelessly 7 days a week just to keep up with his financial obligations. His health was failing, his marriage was strained, and his children barely saw him. Money had become his master, demanding every hour of his life. One day, exhausted and broken, he decided to change his approach. Instead of chasing money, he began to chase purpose. He set aside time to pray, to spend with his family, and to give, even when it didn't make sense. Slowly, things began to shift. A business idea came to him in prayer. He stepped out in faith, and it flourished beyond what his long hours of labor could ever produce. He realized that when he stopped bowing to money and started treating it as a servant, his life was filled with peace, joy, and abundance. His children regained a father, his wife regained a husband, and he gained his health back. Reaching money no longer ruled him, it served him. That is the shift that changes everything. When you let go of slavery to money and step into the freedom of faith. The problem with making money your master is that it is a cruel one. It never says you have enough. It always whispers, get more, work harder, sacrifice more of yourself. It takes your energy, your health, and sometimes even your integrity. But when you see money as a servant, the pressure shifts. You no longer serve money. Money serves your vision. Money becomes a tool to feed the hungry, to bless your family, to fund your dreams, to expand your reach. A servant is commanded, not feared. And so it is with money. You command it through faith, through wisdom, through bold declarations. You decide where it goes, how it works, and what it accomplishes. You become the master, not the slave. That is when money finds its rightful role, as a resource that responds to your faith and obedience, not as a ruler that drains your life of peace. When you understand that money is a servant, you also stop defining yourself by it. Some people look at their empty pockets and think they are worthless. Others look at overflowing accounts and think they are superior. But your identity is not tied to money. A servant does not determine the value of its master. Whether you have much or little, your worth is unchanged. When money serves you, you are free to walk in generosity without fear. You are free to give, knowing more will come. You are free to invest, knowing that increase follows faith. You are free to live with open hands, no longer clutching money as if it defines your future. When money serves you, it becomes a channel, not a chain. And every chain of financial fear is broken when you choose to rise above it and declare, "Money is my servant, not my master." The man who worked himself into exhaustion discovered a powerful truth. Money could not give him peace, joy, or love. But when he stopped serving it and allowed it to serve him, his life was transformed. And that is the same truth waiting for everyone who hears these words. You do not have to bow to financial pressure. You do not have to surrender your peace to the voice of money. The moment you decide that money will no longer master your emotions, your decisions, and your destiny, you step into freedom. Speak to your finances, direct them, and let them serve your higher calling. For money, when put in its proper place, becomes a tool for impact, a resource for legacy, and a servant to your faith-filled command. There is a divine law at work in our lives. Provision follows the steps of faith. Where faith dares to walk, resources are commanded to appear. Too often, people wait for everything to be in place before they move, but provision is never waiting at the starting line. It is waiting at the point of obedience. Faith is the bridge that carries you from lack to supply, from not enough to more than enough. When you stand still in fear, provision stands still too. But when you rise, when you dare to step out on nothing but a word of faith, doors swing open and blessings begin to flow. You may not see the answer at the beginning, but every act of faith is like turning the key to a river of resources. Finances, opportunities, connections, and breakthroughs are already prepared, but they flow to the place where faith goes. This is why many live stuck. They are waiting for provision before moving, when in reality, provision is waiting for their faith to move first. I recall the story of a young man who had a dream to start a small business that would serve his community. He had no money, no investors, and very little support. Every voice around him told him to give up, to wait until he had savings, to abandon the dream until circumstances were more favorable. But inside he felt a stirring of faith. He took a step and printed simple flyers with borrowed money, believing that if he moved, provision would move too. Soon doors opened. A friend offered him free space to operate for a season. Customers began to come in. What he lacked in resources was supplied by unexpected favor. Today, that young man runs a thriving business that not only provides for his family, but also gives jobs to others. How did it happen? He learned that provision is not waiting for money in the bank. It flows where faith dares to go. Faith has never required evidence. It creates evidence. When you step into faith, you may not see the full path, but every step reveals the next. Provision doesn't always come in advance. It comes in response. Just like the river Jordan did not part until the priest stepped into the water, your provision will not show up until you step out. Finances flow to the dream backed by faith. Opportunities appear for the one who refuses to sit still. The problem is that many allow fear to freeze them in place, and while their faith remains stagnant, so does their provision. If you want doors to open, walk toward them. If you want increase, speak it, and act as though it already belongs to you. Faith is not passive. It is bold, active, and commanding. Where faith leads, provision must follow, because faith aligns you with the supernatural supply that has already been promised. Provision flows where faith goes, because faith shifts your vision. Instead of seeing lack, you begin to see possibilities. Instead of worrying about what you don't have, you declare what is already on its way. Faith attracts resources like a magnet, not because you are strong, but because faith connects you to the source of all provision. And when you align your heart, words, and actions with faith, the flow cannot be stopped. You no longer chase money, money begins to chase you. You no longer beg for opportunities, opportunities begin to knock at your door. The law of provision is tied to the movement of faith. If you refuse to move, nothing moves. But if you step out, even trembling, even uncertain, faith creates a current that draws in the resources needed for your assignment. The young man with the dream of business could have allowed fear to silence his destiny. He could have said, "I don't have enough, so I won't even try." But he discovered a truth. Provision was waiting on the other side of his faith. And so it is with you. Whatever vision has been placed in your heart, whatever financial need you carry, whatever dream you have buried under fear, provision is already prepared. It is not waiting for the economy to shift, for the job to call, or for the loan to be approved. It is waiting for you to step out in faith. If faith dares to go there, provision dares to flow there. Your steps of faith will always attract streams of supply, and your bold obedience will always release rivers of abundance into your life. Faith has the power to silence the loudest storms of financial struggle and replace them with peace, confidence, and authority. When you choose to let faith speak louder than your finances, you refuse to bow to fear and begin to command provision with your words. When you recognize that money is only a servant, not a master, you break free from the chains of worry and step into a life where resources follow your purpose rather than control your destiny. And when you understand that provision flows where faith goes, you no longer wait for everything to align before moving. You step out, trusting that every need will be met as you walk forward in obedience. This is the rhythm of breakthrough. Speak boldly, live free from financial fear, and step out in faith. The chains of lack cannot remain when faith rises, because faith calls things that are not as though they already are. Today, let your faith roar louder than your need. Let your vision direct your resources, and let your steps of faith open the rivers of provision waiting for you. Thank you for listening. May your life overflow with abundance, and God bless you.